Hey everyone, how is it going? Hey, how you doing, guys? I'm gonna be a little quiet. My son is here. He's sleeping. I woke him up when I talked just now. So today, if you remembered, if you paid attention at the end of last week's video got cut off. Let's not talk about that. Instagram. I posted a video on Instagram this week of me running my trains. I was so excited. I ran some trains. I took that locomotive in those cars down there, and I ran it into my yard. And it got past the the first set of switches that go into the yard, and past the frog, and then the capacitor ran out of juice and stopped immediately. I scratched my head for a little bit trying to figure out what I did wrong. I forgot to wire up the yard tracks. So there was no way it was going to be able to run a train into the yard. I was so excited about running a train into the yard, and then I couldn't do it. So today I am going to wire up that yard. We're going to do just wiring and soldering for this week. So, a little more of the same, but that's model railroading for you. I'm ready to go. Actually, let me get my soldering iron out. I've also got my, I don't know if you'll be able to see him. He's wandering around here. I've got my my rescue basset, foster hound rescue basset. My foster basset hound rescue is with me today. I picked him up yesterday. He is such an adorable little boy. Let's see if we can see him here. Here he is. Come here. Oh. Come here. Right here. Oh, you can see my son right there. Here's the basset. He's so sweet. He's so sweet. I've got a female basset hound already that I got from the same basset rescue a number of years back, and he is like a carbon copy of her in every way, except coloration. And he's a boy. So yeah, let's take a look at, while this is heating up, let's take a look at the wiring situation. We'll talk a little bit about soldering. I try to keep my live videos more towards, well, all my videos in general, I think, but certainly my live videos more towards the beginning hobbyist. So mostly because I don't do a lot of advanced techniques myself. I'm sure I will eventually one day, with scratch building and weathering and all that kind of stuff. But for right now, I'm building a layout. These are simple, easy beginner tips. So if you are new to things like soldering, we'll talk about it. I'm not a great solderer, so I'll show you like where I go wrong, some tips I've picked up over the years that kind of hopefully make me a little bit of a better solderer. And so that's kind of what today's live stream will be about. Awesome. And I do apologize for not providing music or anything in my live streams. I did it once and it sounded poor over the air, and I got a copyright strike. So I do kind of want to figure out how to provide music in a way that sounds well, that like mixes everything together nicely for you guys. But that's a bigger project that I'm looking forward to getting into right about now. So we will worry about that on a different day. So what we got going on right now is I've already run the feeder wires for my track. You can see them here. They run through little holes in the track work. I have the black wire on the outside and the red on the inside. If I were to rewire my layout again, I would do the red on the outside and the black on the inside, only because there's this kind of thing in model railroading called black in the back, which sounds a little racist, but I'm sure it has nothing to do with that. But they mean it's just they run the black wire, the ground wire on the or the negative, or I should say, on the back side of the track. And using the phrase black in the back, it's easy to remember that the black wire goes to the back of the layout, which means away from the aisle, which you're seeing here is the aisle, and then the black being in the back, towards the back of the layout. It doesn't matter, honestly. You can use any color you want. You can use any combination you want, just as long as you're consistent and you're always hooking the right wire up to the right rail. It can get a little confusing when you start getting into complicated track work and switches and stuff, remembering like which side the black one goes on versus the red one. For me personally, I put the black in the front because I'm going to be running this layout for a while without painting or ballasting it. So I wanted it to look nice. And I didn't want this big gaudy red wire like looking at me in the aisle. So I wanted the black one instead. And so the way I remember it is black in the front, because black is hidden from view better than the red. Don't do it this way. I would say do it with the black in the back, just because if another mono railroader comes to help you wire your layout, somebody who's got maybe electrical experience with mono railroading, which there's a lot of guys out there like that, they're going to want to see, or not, they're going to be more familiar with more traditional style of wiring, and making it easier on them makes everything way better. That soldering iron is heating up, so I'm going to go ahead and strip this wire down. Just got a simple wire stripper, and I'm going to pull these wires out kind of about as far as I think I can get them out easily, because we're going to have to do a few things with them. I'm going to look underneath just to make sure that I can still reach everything I need to. Yeah. So I'm just making sure that stuff is lining up here so that when I go to hook it up to my bus line, everything looks good. So let's go ahead and cut this down a little bit. Is that in focus for you guys? Sometimes the focus isn't the greatest. Feel free to comment if you have questions too, or if you want to just shoot the breeze. I almost said a different word, but you know what I mean. We can talk trains, we can talk whatever. I just tend to want to spend about an hour and a half-ish on the weekends here as a way to like just continue making forward progress on the layout, and just to talk with you guys and see how you guys have been doing for the week. I know there's a lot of other streams out there, and I'm happy that you've chosen mine. Okay, so I have stripped, I don't know if you can see that, hard to see, definitely against that cork road, but I have stripped a little bit of the plastic off of the shielding around the wire itself and exposed the wire. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bend that wire into kind of a shape. And before I do that, I'm going to let this dog upstairs because he's starting to whine. Come on, buddy, upstairs. Nope. Upstairs. Upstairs. Good boy. Okay, so what we're going to do is, let's see if I can show that off at all. So we've got this, here we go. We got this little bit of exposed wire right here. We're going to shape this wire so that it can fit along my rail nicely. So I'm going to make, first I'm going to make a bend. So I kind of bend it at a 90-degree angle. And I'm going to bend it So that 90-degree angle basically allows the wire to kind of run. We go up through the cork and then straight along the same direction that the track runs. And then I'm going to bend it in. I don't know if you can see that. So it kind of goes, so here's the wire going up. Can you see that? It's a little hard to see, and I do apologize. Let me put this against a different color. There's something black I can stick against it. Is there a coaster here? Does that help? Yeah, it helps. Okay. So it goes up and then goes kind of in and then back again. So at 90-degree angle, it's like in and back. It's a little difficult to see, but what that does is that allows the wire to kind of like sit. Like, oh, you can see it really nice there. You can sit it right against the rail, and then it goes kind of like it sits snugly. So that's how that works. And you can just kind of guide that wire down. And I'm going to snip off a little bit of the end because I don't need that much wire in the end. And the less wire you have kind of exposed, the less intrusive into the overall look of the layout it gets. Some guys will say to flatten this wire at the tip here. I haven't been able to successfully really flatten it. So I don't know what they're doing to make it nice and flat. The flattening would help sort of like blend it into the rail a little bit more, but I can't seem to do that. And then some guys will say for this outside rail, actually run it to the inside of the track so you're not seeing where it pokes out of the roadbed, and then where you have to actually solder it into the track. That's a good thing to do. I don't trust my solder skills enough to be able to do that and make it small enough so that I'm not interfering with the flanges on the rail cars and that kind of thing. You know, I don't want them bumping over my terrible soldering welds or whatever you want to call them, because I decided to stick it on the inside of the track where those flanges go. So I keep them on the outside. And when you paint it up, you know, you make it look really nice. You do your ballasting nice. I'm adding joint bars as well. You do all those kinds of things. Nobody's gonna care. If it really bothers you, you can Photoshop it out in your photographs. You know, a guest coming over is not going to notice them unless they're a model railroader. And if they notice them and they're a model railroader, it's only because they do it themselves. I know what that is, you know. Cool. Okay, so those are all bent in place. Let's go ahead and bring these up a little bit. Now it's time to get to soldering. All right, so soldering is super simple, but I will admit it is tricky. I have issues with soldering myself. I think it's just one of those things where you have to have the confidence to know that, like, you're going to mess it up, and that's fine. You can always go back and fix a soldering mistake. Another thing to consider too with soldering is I tend to over solder. I tend to put too much solder on thinking, well, more is better than less. And that is not necessarily the case. You don't really need as much solder as you think you do for a few reasons. You're not welding together a roll cage in a race car, right? This isn't going to have to stand up to major crashes. This is just only going to have to hold a little bit of wiring in place. By the way, so what I've done now, I've gotten flux. This is like a flux paste, and I got toothpaste. And I'm placing a little bit of flux, just a tiny amount, on my wire and the point on the bar, on the rail, I should say, where the two meet. This is an important step because what it does is it helps the solder flow. For a number of years, I didn't use flux, and I had a lot of problems. We'll get into that here in a second. Anyways, so you don't need as much solder as you think you do. You don't want to do too little because it will pull away if you're not careful. But too much can also become an issue too. So there's like a happy sort of middle ground. I'm gonna take my watch off. Watch is too nice to risk it around solder right now. First thing I'm going to do when I solder. Hey there, Melvin. Thank you for joining up. I'm sorry if I didn't see your chat before. I'm kind of getting used to this whole YouTubing thing. Let me go ahead and pour some water on my sponge. So a few things with soldering. You want a nice solder iron. Don't cheap out on the solder iron. They're fairly cheap anyway. This is a Weller, which I paid, I think, around, I want to say $70 for this thing, which is expensive. You don't have to spend this much money. I got a Weller knockoff, which I used for many years on my old layout, for I think around $15. It looked exactly the same. It behaved exactly the same. Some of the materials are nicer on this one. I don't know that it's, $55 nicer. But the other one being the knockoff of this, it functions basically the same. I don't notice a huge difference between the two. I would say this is nicer, but it's not so nicer. All right, so it's not so much nicer. Hey, so you're working on your wiring and your layout too? Awesome. I'm going to be working on the wiring on my layout for a while to come, I think. I've got a really interesting wiring project where I'm going to be wiring up remote switch machines on Tortoise, remote Tortoise switch machines in my hidden yard. In order to have those operate powered by my DCC system, which will be awesome when it works and then tricky for me to make it work. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of solder on the tip of this wire that I bent into shape here. It's called tinning, is that method. And I'm just going to add just enough to kind of wet down the tip of the wire, if you will. And that flux that I've added will help me to make that happen. And that's a very helpful technique, because if you don't do this, you have some issues with your soldering. Because when you go to solder to the track work, if you don't already tin the wire, if you don't already add a little bit of solder to that wire, what you're trying to do is you're trying to do two things. You're trying to connect the wire to the track using solder, and you're also trying to get enough solder to flow on the wire so that that connection can be made, if that makes sense. If I've already got solder already on the tip of my wire, I've cut out the need to do one of those two things. So now when I go to solder stuff to the track, all I really got to do is just flow enough solder onto the wire and the track and the rail so that those two can kind of melt together and create a nice connection. It's kind of a confusing way of putting it, but essentially what I'm saying is you're doing half the work before you try to make a connection. And the hardest part of soldering is that connection, right? Is getting the two things to connect together and stay together. That's just the one part that's really kind of tricky. So here's another tip for everyone. When you're working with soldering track work, you're talking about hot metal right up against soft plastic being the rails. If you're not careful, you can melt rail, melt the ties. So for years, that was kind of an issue for me. Or you just hold it against there too long because you're trying to make a good connection, and you start to see the rails, or sorry, the ties melt around your spot. I picked up these. This is actually part of a kit of like helping hands. If you look up like soldering helping hands on Amazon, you'll see these. All this is an alligator clip and then like a long piece of wire with a white shroud around it. But it's meant to like hold wires in place while you're soldering. But if I put this on either side of that joint that I'm going to make, what happens is as I'm heating up the rail, that heat flows into this metal because the metal's nice and conductive. And so it's going to soak up all that heat and keep it away from the plastic ties. And it does a remarkable job. I am surprised at how well this works to keep my ties from melting. I have not had much of an issue with ties melting once I started using this technique. So I highly recommend it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and basically fit that wire into place right up snug against the rail. And then I'm just going to run a little bit of solder into it. So I hold my soldering iron up against the rail and start to just run a little bit of solder into there. And that is good. I'll take these alligator clips off. I'll go ahead and kind of run my soldering iron back over it again just to kind of smooth out that solder a little bit and just get for a little bit of a prettier joint. Okay. It's not something I necessarily worry about on the back side of rails, but front side of the rails, I kind of want to make that look as smooth and nice as possible. This is a section I don't normally do right away, but when that cools down, what you can do is you can take a Bright Boy, which is a little, do a search on your favorite Model Railroad store page, and you can find Bright Boys. But you can just run it along the top of the railhead, cleans the solder up off of there. You don't need to do that right now. It's not a step you need to do right away, but that cleans up the top of your railhead. And another thing you can do, I'll take a small round file occasionally, and I'll just kind of file along that that solder joint if I need to a little bit, and it'll remove a little bit of the solder from that joint and just clean it up and make it look a little bit nicer. Honestly, not a really important step at all. You'll find out that when you paint it up, it pretty much goes away. But I like to be a little bit neater in my work. It just takes a little bit longer It's part of the process. So that's what I do. Let's go ahead and do the next one. Melvin, what are you modeling, if I might ask? Always curious to see what people model. I'm modeling a modern era layout myself, but I'm really interested in a transition era, steam, diesel transition era. I think that's an awesome era. I love like logging short lines and stuff with those old shays. I kind of really started to get more and more into steam locomotives in recent years, but I'm not modeling them myself. That looks pretty good. And it seems like a lot of the younger guys we're all the modern modelers, which makes sense. We're modeling what we see, stuff we grew up with, the railroads we like. I like the modern equipment. I like modern boxcars better than steam era boxcars. Not a big fan of the look of the steam era boxcar, but I love a beautiful steam engine. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my wire is nicely snug against the rail, so that the wire is not kind of fighting me, trying to pull itself away from the rail while I'm trying to solder it towards the rail. So if I can get that wire as snug against that rail as possible before I even run solder into that area, I know that the connection will be strong. It's a pretty darn good joint there. I'm getting better at this, guys. I've tried soldering stuff to PC board before, and I'm not great. But I feel like I can be better now. Go ahead and just run back over top of this and kind of smooth that out just a little bit. Yeah. You can tug on the wire below the layout a little bit just to make sure that it is not like pulling itself off accidentally. That's a good thing to do too. I did see somebody who looks like he's younger than me do a. He's got a appears to be a late transition era coaling layout, coal, Appalachian themed coal layout, and it's gorgeous. What an amazing modeler that guy is! Just an excellent. He's got it very far along. He's got an excellent eye for color and composition. I am super jealous. And he's younger than me. He's cooler than me too. He's got tattoos. Sorry about blocking camera here. Oop. Yeah, this one's being a pain. So what's happening here is this one keeps wanting to pull away. It's kind of twisted. So it's pulling away from the rail. So I'm going to push it against the rail, heat the solder up. And then hold it against the rail with this file while that solder cools back down again. Trying to do that without making an issue for myself. '80s era is nice. Some really cool. '80s era is kind of a transition era as well. All right, you got some SDs. Those are kind of like the main. So to give you guys an idea what happened, my wire was pulling itself away from the track a little bit, kind of twisting itself away. So I'd put the solder on, and then I would take the iron off, and then it would just kind of pull itself off of the rail because the solder hadn't had time to sort of cool, and it kind of pulled itself away from the rail. So it was doing the thing that I don't like to see happen. So what I did was I held this up against it so that the wire would hold against the rail. Ran the solder in there, or heated the solder up, let everything kind of melt together. Pulled the solder gun away and held this here in place until the solder cooled back down again. And then once it did, it is holding solid now. If I were to look at it, it's not the prettiest solder joint in the world. But luckily it's on the back side. Yeah, so the '80s is cool because you have like these SD40s, but you also have some like kind of interesting, kind of weird units as well that you don't see anymore. Lots of small diesel switchers as well. I love like the little like the SW 1500s and that kind of thing. All right, so we're going to continue. You know what? You don't have to be one of the good ones. You just have to enjoy what you're doing. I know. I see a lot of those guys. I'm like, oh, to be that guy. It's a good challenge to get there. As long as you have fun along the way, that's the really important part. I've been on layouts that have not been, the most show-worthy of layouts. But the owner loves them and loves running trains on them and loves sharing his layout with others, and that's the most important part. It's always going to be somebody better than you. I learned that lesson quick. I was an artist in high school in the town of Decatur, Illinois. And, one of the better artists in my high school, just because we're not a huge high school. Not a lot of kids in there super into art. It was kind of the time when it was a different time where like art and that kind of geekery was not as widely accepted by your fellow students. Kids nowadays have it pretty cool when it comes to that kind of thing. Gosh, man, what is wrong with all my wiring today is all doing the same thing. Oof. I'm not happy with that. This one's doing the same thing the other one did, except it's doing it on the front side. Where everyone can see it. Anyway, I was an artist in my school, and pretty good at it. And so I figured, hey, when I go to college, I'm going to become like some sort of awesome artist, make lots of money doing art things. Kind of wanted to do comics at the time, like newspaper comics. That's kind of my deal. So I went to college. I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design. Here we go. And I found myself amongst a group of students, much like myself, who were all the best artists in their schools. And these students were from all over the United States and all around the world. So I learned very quickly that, like, I might be good, but you put me up against the best of the best from all over the world, I'm not very good at all. So I had to do a lot of work. I learned that I had to really try for the first time in my life in order to kind of keep up with what my peers were doing on the art scene. And I did better than some, and I did worse than others. And leaving college, some people got jobs and some people didn't. But what I learned was there's always going to be somebody better than you. And all you can do is put in the work and do the best job you can. And by putting in the work, you'll become a better artist, or modeler in this case. See if I can file that front one down a little bit. That was an ugly looking joint. Yeah, it looks like it's going to file down nicely, which means it's going to paint up nicely. See if I can pin that wire down in there a little bit better. And if it files down nicely and it paints up nicely, it will disappear. Mr. Russell, how's it going? You know what? Getting trains running again there, Melvin. That's all you can ask for. Okay, so that's all wired up. I still got it connected to the bus line under the table. I'm not going to do that now with you guys on here. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the swing gate, and we're going to do some similar soldering over there as well. So I'm going to awkwardly move things. For you guys. Give me a second here, sorry. For those in the chat, Russell is my brother. Thank you for stopping by, buddy. Let's swing this gate into place here. We'll lock it into place here. This swing gate is a little awkward. I've got my tolerances really tight on this thing, which is great for track alignment, but oh, nuts. Is it not going to? come on. This swing gate, I swear to baby Jeebas. But depending on the time of year, it wants to do different things. Come on. That's annoying. I'll show you what's going on here. Here's my swing gate. And it's just slightly off on the bottom, which means, there we go. Yeah, once it locks into place, you can see right here, it's super nice. Getting it to lock into place, it's kind of tough. But once it locks into place, this lines up nicely. I got to figure out something about that because I can't keep that being an issue. I think I got to sand down a couple of these spots here. I think if I did that, it'd be fine. It's a fine line. You want it to be nice and snug so it doesn't move. If it's too loose, you start to run into like derailment issues. It's just a pain in the butt. I do not recommend swing gates if you can avoid them. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We're at my swing gate. Let me pull the camera back a little bit so you can kind of see. Sorry about that. So this gate goes across my door. It's nice and thin. It's cool. It's a pain in the butt to get closed and locked into place. I'm going to have to figure something out about that. But I've got all this wiring. I've got a crossover here and some track on either side. And I'm trying to run all the wiring through one hole in the bottom so I can kind of cleanly clean up with some wire wrap, clean up this line, run it all down and off the side. So I have done that kind of successfully so far. Can you see? Here's where everything kind of disappears down into the one hole. And then you got wire running like all the way up in here, and you got wire running all the way back to here, to these tracks back here. And this isn't the prettiest, but once I ballast everything, once I paint and ballast everything, it should be pretty hard to recognize the issues going on here. So I've only got a few things left to wire up on top, and then I just got to strip everything down below, run everything together, wire things down below. Let's work on the top right now. See how far we get with this. So I'm going to use the white here. Same techniques. Same techniques as before, nothing's changed. Other than we're in kind of a different situation, different location. Let me go get all my stuff, bring it over here. Just trying to find the least awkward place to set up all my stuff. Over here. Sorry about that. 11 people watching the stream. That's awesome. I don't think I've ever had 11 people watching before. Very cool. Thank you all for stopping by. Is this in focus? It's focus-ish. Okay. So I've got these two wires here. I got to run one to this track, and I got to run this red one to this track. Not going to be a big issue. That should go in there pretty well. The only awkward thing is, like, I can't, because this wire's running under this track back to this hole, I can't, like, I've got to be pretty precise with where I kind of cut things. So I want to run this wire right along here up against this rail. So I'll cut it right about there. Yeah. It's a little tricky because if I screw up these cuts, you don't get a second chance at it without ripping up the rail to get to it. Not cool. Oh, you know what? The other thing I want to do is I kind of want to set this down into the cork a little bit. Let me get my knife. I'm just going to cut a little slit in the cork because I kind of want this wire to, as much as possible, which may not be much, which may not be very possible. Much as I can, I'd like for it to sit down into the cork a little bit. Just so I can kind of, when I ballast over it, I don't have to ballast so high to cover up that wire. All right, let's go ahead and bend this into place. Yep. Trim it up a little bit. And if anyone has any questions about anything they're seeing me do, feel free to speak up. I'll try to answer them. I want this to be a learning and growing experience for everyone, including myself. Soldering can be a little tricky. It can be a little scary at first. I have been doing it for years, and I am still holding my breath every time I do it, which you should be holding your breath because if you've ever breathed in a lung full of solder, woo! Can you hear me okay? My microphone's way far away from me. I'm going to speak a little bit louder just in case you can't hear me okay. If you've ever breathed in a lung full of hot solder smoke, it ain't cool. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I breathed in a lung full of solder smoke once, and I thought I was going to die. It is so hot on your lungs. So, pro tip for soldering: when you are applying the solder to the metal or you're doing anything with it, do not breathe. Okay, Russ says he can hear fine. Awesome. Okay. And if you've just shown up, I want to repeat. For those of you who've been watching for a little while, I apologize, but I'm going to repeat what I'm saying here for those who just showed up, because there are quite a few people in this room now. I am applying a little flux. This is a little flux paste. This is just the paste on the cap itself, a toothpick, to the wire into the rail itself. And that just, it helps the solder flow more like a liquid and keep it from being so globby. And that is excellent in helping to get that soldered flow between the wire and the rail and get it to be nice and smooth, and so that you don't have to use quite so much solder in order to get good results. So now I'm doing a technique called tinning, which means you're just applying a little bit of solder to the wire itself before you go to attach that wire to the rail. It just it helps out tremendously, because if you were not to do this and you were to just try to solder directly the wire directly to the rail with the solder, it would work, but it would take a little bit longer to do and possibly a little more solder. And possibly the joint wouldn't be quite as clean because you don't have solder completely surrounding your wire necessarily. By tinning your wire previous to this, you've already got solder applied to the wire, so that when you go to heat up the joint, go to heat up the rail and make that solder joint, all you're really doing is kind of filling in between the wire and the rail, and the solder from the wire will flow into the solder that you're applying to the rail, and it'll make for a nice clean joint. So you're not having to try to do two things at once. So you're only doing one thing, which is connecting the already soldered wire to the rail, and it makes a world of difference as far as that goes. And these alligator clips just kind of help direct the heat away from the plastic ties and up into the metal. And it does a world of good keeping your ties from melting. This is going to be a little on the tricky side because this wire is not already laying nicely against this rail. So I kind of have to bend it into place before I even go to solder it. This is going to be tricky. I'm going to do one more thing here. Okay, I'm going to use a push pin or a thumbtack to hold that wire down and into place against the rail for me. Yeah, because I'm going to be using two hands. Ugh, this is not going to go very well. Sorry, it's hard to see what's going on here. So essentially I've got this, if I can do it this way. I need another set of hands is what I really need. So I've got this wire that's sticking kind of out and away from the track, and I'm trying to solder against the track. In order to do that, I need to be able to hold the wire against the track, hold the soldering iron, put them both together. It's a little tricky. I'm going to try this technique. I'm going to load the tip of the soldering iron with solder. Okay. to hold the wire against the track, and I'm going to take that loaded soldering iron. I'm going to apply that solder. Boom. I think that worked. Yep, that worked. Cool, that worked. Awesome, awesome. Not the prettiest looking joint in the world. I'll figure out a way to clean that up and make that look nicer. But at least we have electrical conductivity there. This is on my swing gate, so it's not going to be the best looking thing in the world. But if you come over and you see my layout, please just forgive me. Okay, so I'm done. Do you want to do the same thing on this side? I've loaded up my soldering iron with some solder. And now we are going to just, oops, you know what? Let me get that wire up here so that I'm going to redirect that heat. Cool, that worked. Cool. Yeah, and that's not super pretty on that side either, but ooh. Yeah. Not the prettiest either, but it works. It works. Okay. We're going to move on a little bit further down the line and do the same thing on this side. We have 3 areas here which need to be soldered. One right here, one a little bit further down here, and then this one's got to run somewhere over here as well. You can see this like sarlacc pit of wires coming out of the track here. And these wires, I can pull on these wires a little bit. So. Yeah, we're just pulling the shielding off the wire there. I'm going to show you guys how to do this bend again too. So hopefully that's in focus for you. We'll just pull the shielding off that wire. And what we're going to do is we're going to bend it so that we can place it against the rail. So we're going to go ahead and do our first bend, which takes it and you fold it kind of 90 degrees. Hopefully you can see that okay. I can't tell very well if you can see it, if it's in focus. And then you're gonna, so it's comes out and then over 90 degrees, and you're gonna kind of twist it back on itself again. So you're gonna grab it and then you're gonna twist. So it's two, oh, come on. It's two, there you go. Hopefully you can see that really well. Can you see that? I can't tell because my computer's too far away, but it's going over and then back. So you got the little back part is where you're going to place the solder. The over kind of helps it so it's sort of snugly fit on the edge of the rail. And that's the point of that. Then we kind of trim it a little shorter because you don't need all that excess. Just need a little bit in order to make your connection. So we do the same on these guys over here. Right there. And right there. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other one. I'm going to cut a little slot so I can kind of try to get my wire more snugly against under the ballast, so I can get a little more snugly against the thing here. Let's go ahead and tin these wires. Maybe. I'm going to grab some flex paste. Don't need a ton, but a little bit. Don't breathe while the magic smoke appears. Cool. Okay, and I'm going to do the same technique I did on the other ones, which is I'm going to load up my solder iron with some solder and then press it into place that way. This seems to work out pretty good in these areas where, don't do this on normal track, but if you don't have a good way to sort of hold the wire against the track otherwise, because I'm kind of doing this weird way of running all the wiring into like one hole. That seems to be the best way to do it. So let's go ahead and, oops, I got my wire all twisted around. Let's go ahead and load up the tip of our gun. of our iron. I'm using the back side of this file to kind of push that wire into place. And it's being a pain in the you know what. Come on. Get on down in there. Here we go. The flux will help just transfer that solder from. Yeah, look at that. That worked out pretty good. The flux just transfers that solder from the tip to the rail. Awesome. So happy that worked out well. Let's go ahead and pull this guy down, stick him into place. And we are going to do the same technique. Okay, let's load up our iron with some solder. Come on. Encourage that wire to get pressed against the rail. Here we go. Oh, this is in the way. Awesome. Again, not pretty, but it works. You can kind of come back in here and adjust this wire a little bit. Yeah, I may need to come in here later on and mess with that a little bit. Yeah, let's do that. Let's leave that as is for now. Just trying to make that joint look better. It'll take a little bit. We'll worry about that at a different time. All right, one final one. And we're going to use the same technique on this one as we did on the others. probably just hold this up with my hand if I do it far enough away. This one's a little tricky. Cool. And that is going to do it, my friends. I think that's going to be it for today's stream. I'm going to spend a little bit of time cleaning up these wires a little bit, kind of bending things down, make things look a little bit prettier, maybe doing some filing. You know, again, like I said, you can take a little file and you can kind of do a lot to clean up the look of these joints. That and a bright boy to clean off the tops. And you get yourself pretty good looking connections overall. Oh, a little notch at the end of the file handle. That's a good idea. Russ had a good idea of putting a little notch at the end of this so that when I hold it, it kind of holds it nicely in place. You know, I'm sure there are some like wire holders I could probably get off Amazon for like $3 that would do the same thing too. I'm just using this file just because it's what I have around and it's metal. That's a good idea. Anyways, hi. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. I greatly appreciate it. What is this? How long have we been going at it now? So about an hour and 20 minutes. Thanks, pretty good. Got most of our wiring in place so that now I can run trains into the yard. I got some of like the trickier wiring done on, actually the most tricky wiring done on the swing gate here so that I can begin to do what I need to do here to get my swing gate wired up so I can run a full circle of track and we'll just have trains running for hours and hours on end. That'll be fun to get that finally working the way I want it to. So yeah, so this has just been a day of soldering, which is my least favorite part about the hobby, but it has to be done. Wire and soldering, it has to be done. So thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. We had like 11 people in here at one point, which was awesome. Awesome to get that many people interested in checking this out. If you haven't seen this stuff before, I'm doing this every Saturday at 9 a.m. Central from here until the end of time, or I die, or the virus gets me. One of the three things. Sorry, that was dark humor. I apologize. No, I plan on doing this every Saturday just because it's fun and it keeps me actually like engaged in this layout, which my mind gets easily distracted by other things. So it's cool to have this sort of, let's say, a thing that just helps keep me kind of going. So thanks for stopping by. Awesome to see everyone here. Melvin, get running some trains. All right, see you guys probably next Saturday.